my dummy shaft should start coming out. This shaft is so stupid, it's like a dummy. Yeah, getting up to the second set of needle bearings. Alright, I'm going to start using brass. I'll bugger this thing up. Okay, we got to rotate that a little bit. Right down a smidge. Okay, that's good. So the reverse idler gear went in all right, and I'm sorry, the cluster gear. Now I'm going to do the reverse idler, and this swisher thing for cleaning fan blades has been very handy. So I have to thank my wife for letting me use it. And the freezer and the oven. Since it's Valentine's Day, I should probably do that. Alright, reverse idler gear, it all lined up in there, so I'm going to go ahead and whack it in. And keep in mind these notches here need to line up for the retainer blade. You got to watch for all this time is to make sure, be careful if this thing comes out, you're going to lose all your roller bearings, so that'd be a bad thing. Because they're a pain in the buttiness. Alright, let's see how this baby goes in. This can be a little bit of a pain, aren't you? Alright, it works. So, a little bit more tappage. I'll see what I can do without brass. Alright. We are looking good. So now we'll do the output shaft housing. That'll retain this bearing. And then I'll be able to functional check it, run it through the gear cycles. Right now I don't want to do it because I'll push this bearing out. Watch it. Do not do that. Not getting a concentric tap here. There we go. Good. New gasket, surface cleaned up, gasket all spooged up. Easy, easy. Whoa! Make sure this retainer ring is in here properly. It's your last chance to mess with that. Something feels weird. I wonder if it's that speedometer cable. There we go. A little sealant on here. Actually, a lot of sealant on here. Kind of messy and sloppy, but it could save some anguish later. So got it all back together here, and got the plate on. I'm actually going to hold off on putting the oil, finishing up the plate, because I might want to tip it vertically with the bale housing to store it. I'm not sure. It serves space, but the plugs, little ID tag, real delicate, thin ID tag, and what I was able to do was soak it and treat it, get the rust off, and then sprayed it with some Eastman rust converter, and I was able to retrieve all the data on that, so that was kind of cool. But anyway, I'm going to call this project done. D-U-N, done. I may come back and paint the lever arms a little bit, but and I need to plug that speedometer hole so I don't get any dust in it. But this thing is going to go on the back end of this 170 engine over here, which is my original project, before I got distracted with this. So now I'm going to get back to that, and a combination of that big old monstrous 6-cylinder 170 engine with this big old 2.77 tranny on the end. Yeah. You're driving down the road like Grandpa. Alright, more to follow. I'm also going to do a video on that engine up build, but I lost some of the original video, but keep an eye out for that. And this Comet, I tipped this thing over inside my garage so that I could restore the underbelly. If you're interested in that, Google wooden car tip over jig, I think is what I called it. It's pretty, a couple $100. I was able to flip this car over inside my garage so that I could restore the bottom of it, which is kind of cool. Alrighty, you've been a very patient audience. Thanks for sticking around. should do it. Mustn't forget the slinger ring. Ain't that just my luck? You know what, I'm gonna go with 2 blocks of wood here, I believe. Yeah, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Bink. Alright. That should do it. So the first thing that goes in here is the cluster gear, which is this guy. And looking through the instructions there, it calls for you to insert the dummy shaft. So I'm walking around like a dummy trying to find the dummy shaft. And then I'm thinking, how in the world are we going to get this thing in here because of all these roller bearings? So it dawned on me that the dummy shaft is a shaft that you're not going to use. So I made myself a dummy shaft. Walked around the house till I finally found something that happened to be the correct diameter. And so what we'll do is we'll build it up with these roller bearings and then push this dummy shaft out. And I had to make a sacrifice from the swisher thing for cleaning the tops of fans. So once again, I have my wife pissed off at me. Alright, so I'm going to set this thing up with, this is the spacer that keeps the bearings at the proper distance from each other. And in order to stack it up high enough, I'm going to put this temporarily in here, flip it over. Now I can begin to insert my bearings. So it has a, I don't know what you call it, a thrust washer or whatever on the bottom of the bearings, and then another one on the top. So I'm going to start loading these babies up here, and we'll see what happens. This could get interesting. I'm sure I'm going to be banging my head on the wall a little bit before this ordeal is over. Got those on the small end all in there, and then I carefully flipped it over, pulled my cardboard out, dropped the thrust washer in, and now I'm ready to begin the second batch of needle bearings. All ready to go in. Very delicate operation here. And I ended up with 4 extra needle bearings, which is a little disconcerting, but I assume they thought I was going to drop approximately 4 or 5 of these things on the floor, which I'm surprised they didn't. Here goes nothing. See if I could do this without screwing it up. I could go in at an angle here just to get beyond the initial lip. And then go like this. It's going into place. So far, so good. Rotate that a smidger. I want this vertical. So theoretically, she should slide right on in there. And it's going to be a pain in my ass. There we go.
I'm not sure what you said there.
I beg your pardon. Siri, was I talking to you? Thank you. Can't you see I'm busy? Okay, all lined up. Out with the dummy shaft, in with the real shaft. Being a gynecologist in a lot of ways. Okay. Out with the dummy shaft. Okay. That's the reverse idler gear I just installed. That was a new one. My old one was a little funky. And anyway, there's nothing to it. You just drop it in there and drive this pin in. Gotta watch out for this detent here because it has to line up with the cluster gear shaft so that you can have this lock pin in there. So next I'm going to put in the shift fork plunger and cam. What this does is these balls lock into these detents. The spring load and this cam goes back and forth. One is for reverse and first. The other one is for third and fourth. So when you shift, like dunk dunk, you feel as this ball popping into these things. So I'm going to stick that in real quick. So this tapered pin goes into a detent in there to hold that in, and then I'm getting ready to put the seal in here as well. But as I was able to get this ball to lock into the detent there, check it, make sure it works. Click, click. Yep. Yep. All right. I should have filmed this, but I didn't. But for these seals around here, they don't have a wire spring in them, but they are pretty tight seals. And to get a nice evenly distributed push on them, just take a socket and solder on some black silicone gasket sealant, Permatex, and get it on there just right. Actually, this is the one I used. One really good smack to get it started in there. You don't want to be going in and out with it. Give it a really good smack, get it in there, and then find little taps to get it to the right depth. So that looks about right. So I slowed down a little bit and I had to back up and RTFI, read the doggone instructions. And what it says is to put the gear all the way in the very bottom of the box where the shaft is not all the way through it, the cluster gear. And that allows you to get the input shaft in because it needs to clear that initial gear right there. Anyway, and you also need your reverse idler gear to be a little bit floppy. So you insert the shaft just enough to where it holds the gear in place. There's a little bit of play. Then you insert your shifting forks into those cam arms, a little bit of grease on them, flat web to the back, and that's the low gear fork. This is the high gear fork. Set those in place. Then you build your synchronizer sleeve with your block with your sleeve and one sync ring. Set that aside. And now we need to prepare the input shaft to be ready to receive the output shaft that rotate independently, and similarly to the cluster gear, it has needle bearings. These aren't nearly as thin and delicate as the others, and they go down inside this little recess here. Right, so to put this output shaft in, you first get the sync ring set up with the 3 blocks and the retaining ring on either side. There's a short spline and a long spline. Long spline goes forward. I assume that applies to all Ford applications. So you have your ring ready. Put that on standby. Low gear is first. So you have your shifting forks in there. Line the low gear up onto the fork and go ahead and start your shaft. So what you want to do is engage these guys into these teeth, which gets a little dicey. This is quite a frustrating operation here. Seems like those things would engage real quick and easy, but they don't. Okay, now for intermediate gear with the spline surface forward. Oops. Everything gets in the way of everything. It just mates up against the low gear. There's nothing in between them or anything. Alright. Let's put this baby in with only one sync ring, the aft. Drop it in there and try to pick up the forward shifting fork, which is easier said than done. Got it. Okay, now continue to go in. I gotta re-engage the low gear here. Okay. Oh, sync ring came out. Not a big deal though. There. Go ahead and head on in. Make sure the bearing's concentric. Boom. I'm in. The forward sync ring goes in. Index to the little retainer pins. And it's going to be a pain in the butt. There. Boom. Alright, I'm all hooked up. Prior to that, the input shaft, this was a special treat. Putting the needle bearings in here, and I'm sure in a minute they're going to come tumbling. Let's see what happens. Please don't fall out. Alright. Alright, I gotta fiddle around with this a little bit, but we're getting pretty close. Yes, we have success. This is gonna be a good day. So now I'll need to go get the cluster gear, bring it back up into alignment with and push out the dummy shaft to pick up those needle bearings, and then we'll do the reverse idler gear. I made a boneheaded mistake, forgot to put this retainer snap ring on the end of the sync block here. There's a groove just beyond the last set of teeth there. So I had to pull the input shaft out. Get this baby in here and we'll try it again. Come on, baby. Come on, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Seems a little counterintuitive to be putting stuff like this back on when we still have the cluster gear, remember, is still floating down there. Hadn't lined up yet with this pin, and same with the reverse idler gear. So, but what we got to do is isolate these shafts so they don't come out of the bearings don't come out of the housing. So, this is actually a bearing retainer. Seems like it doesn't look like a bearing retainer at first, but so let's slap that baby on, and we'll go from there. to line up this oil passage on the bottom. Also should have mentioned there's a oil seal inside here as well. They're replaced. Okay. Now it's time to get back to this cluster gear and the shaft. So I want it nice and straight, so I put a long taper pin on this side and on this side. To get it lined up, I wrapped a zip tie around in there to make myself sort of a suspension deal here. We want to drive this from the wait a second. No. I want to drive from the aft. I'm sorry, I got this wrong. So I'm going to do this to get it concentric. Okay. I'll drive from here. Anyway, I'll pick it up with this tie wrap so that I can get it where I want it before I start beating on it. Look in there and get it lined up. And remember, I got that dummy in there. Feels about right. Actually, I'm going to use this here so I can get it lined up better. There we go. Turn the gears a smidge. Lines. And here we go. Get my locking notch tooth lined up. So my dummy shaft should start coming out. Stupid, it's like a dummy. Yeah, getting up to the second set of needle bearings. Alright, I'm going to start using brass. I'll cover this thing up. Okay, we got to rotate that a little bit. Break in a smidge off. Okay, let's